tree is even harder to figure out than this area, but there's a couple different perspectives on it, you might say, and we will try and explore those. But first, we've got to cover the rest of the quarry area because it's split in two. There's these two different zones.
Cut the music, go back and look at that fern. Stanley, this fern will be very important later in the story. Make sure you study it closely and remember it carefully. You won't want to miss anything.
Alright, so we made that whole video about the quarry and we forgot to go back and look at the tree. So here we are. Welcome back to Examining the Witness. This is going to be a kind of mini episode. We talked all about the quarry and stuff in episode 10. This is going to be episode 10 and a half, and we're going to talk about the tree. And this is going to be, as always, I encourage you guys to use the sort of timestamp highlights in the video description to hop around to your favorite parts, because in this mini episode we're just going to talk all about this tree, and hopefully it won't take too long. It's clearly kind of important because it's so big, and it's a relatively high point on the island. I think we're above everything except some of the stuff near the mountain and the big tower and the tower in the town. It's one of the landmarks of the game.
It's also on the boat map.
Yes, it is on the map of the boat, separate from the quarry area. So it's got to mean something, but what does it mean? And of course it has all these sweet faces in it, which we'll talk about, and it's just an awesome tree. But before we get to sort of the true meaning of the tree as I see it, we're also going to go on a kind of discursive meander of thinking about how I interpret art and what it means, and seeing all these meanings that aren't there and stuff. I've spent however many hours talking about the witness, and probably half the stuff I've said has been kind of made up, or I'm not quite getting it or whatever. And I'm in this video series, I'm going with kind of a maximalist interpretation, where I'm fine with seeing some things that aren't there in exchange for picking up on all the stuff that is there. But we're just going to talk about that a little bit, because that is also sort of a theme of the game in Secret of Psalm 46 and some other places. But if you're not here for this and you just are Jackson, what's the tree about, then just go to the timestamps and you'll be able to find all the fun parts of the video. So yeah, to continue along that vein. So I think the main meaning, which again we'll probably return to later, is that it's sort of an art experiment. It's your classic Witness 2D, 3D moment where you have this thing, just like trees in real life, they just have this majestic three-dimensionality to them, where they're this almost sort of weird, incomprehensible fractal shape, and there's stuff going off in every direction and stuff. So it just kind of pulls you into the three-dimensionality of the worlds, and it's almost like a demonstration. I mean, one of the things that the Witness is trying to do is here's what's unique about video games, here's what only video games can do, and it's also a game about 3D rendering. We have this whole land that's all about just the specular reflection of the desert and stuff, and how light works. And so I think this tree is kind of a sculpture statement of three-dimensionality. I mean, I don't know, but ordinary trees are also like that. But most video game trees are not like this, right? This is kind of unusual sculpture. It's bare, of course.
That's what
usually you just do a trunk and then you put some leaves on there, and you actually can't do justice to the fractal complexity of real trees, because video games are really good at flat polygons and not super weird fractal shapes. And so for instance, these trees out here are outside of the trunk view distance, and so you can see they're split into really simple flat kind of cardboard cutout images of leaves. So I think it's a statue honoring three-dimensionality, and it's sort of a 2D 3D moment, but why are there all these 2D 3D moments in the Witness? And like what does that in turn mean? And that in part, I mean, a lot of people would say that, so the witness has all these illusions, right? So like it has these faces, which if I line up properly, we can see like this is like the outline of a woman, and we've got a nose and like a mouth and a chin and eyes in the form of these tiny 2 leaves that are alive on this tree. And this,
oh yeah, that's the other thing. It's not totally dead. There's 2 leaves on it.
Yes. I don't know what the little 2 leaves are about. Like I said,
it's all about life and death, right? Like there's like kids on this. There's an old man. Isn't there an old man?
Yeah. Okay. So a little bit about the faces. So there's the ones that we've seen here. We've got the lady. We've got this person here who just looks like kind of a neutral human type face. There is like a guy up here who is sort of looking up at the sun, which is another classic witness, sort of like grasping toward, you know, the sun is the symbol of like the kind of like perfect knowledge, or like, you know, knowledge of or some like unattainable enlightenment or something. So we have his eye here. We've got some wrinkles on the forehead, the nose, the lips, and then an ear, and then the whole neck outlined. And I wonder if there's almost like veins in the neck like that.
Oh,
the veins and branches.
That's his
and stuff.
neck. Okay.
Yeah. This is like his shoulder. Yeah, that's why this whole thing is so long.
That's strange.
Yeah. And then of course because the sun is
I
shining.
guess that really confirms that he's looking up. As well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it lines up slightly different. Right here, his face is kind of compressed, and then if you get forward, it's hard to find the exact location. But because the sun is sort of shining through him, you could try and make the sun into like his head or something. But oops. But then you lose the definition of the mouth and everything down there. Because the sun is shining through him, you get a shadow of his silhouette here as well on the sand. So that's kind of nice. But there are yet more faces. And I think there's one who is...
Isn't there just one more that you can on the
Yeah,
other side?
yeah. There's,
maybe there's another.
Here's a wacky ear. That's not the ear of the guy. That's the ear of... This guy is a different guy. And I think it lines up best from like way down here or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so we got a face here where we have like a closed eye and an ear and then like sort of weird lips and then a nose and all that. It's sort of like a distorted face, maybe almost like a parody of how good the others are, and this is sort of like being a little bit, or maybe there's some other place where I have to
put that many
stand
faces in.
Yeah. And then there is still one more. Oh yeah, it's this branch right here. It's like a
like a baby
face. Yeah, it looks like a baby on like an umbilical cord. Almost. I mean, except umbilical cords obviously don't go to the mouth, but this is we've got like this closed eyes, nose, and mouth or something. It's kind of like a wrinkly face. Yeah, like a little baby or possibly like an old man. Yeah, and I've wondered, like, is this like stages of life? Like maybe this is and then the fact that the rain cloud is right behind it feels kind of significant. Like, is this like he's drinking the water or something, or like the water is like, you know, coming from the tree is drinking the water, you know, because of photosynthesis, or like maybe he's like a baby and he's like drinking the milk, and you know, then maybe you have like the young woman is another stage of life, except none of them is like obviously an old man. Are the two faces here like doing the vase thing, you know? Like, did they put one on each side just to like be vases?
And, like, up, down, or like in some order?
Yeah, there's also a nice arc of clouds here. This is something that at least we know is in the game, where the clouds line up with the tree, right, and give it this kind of...
I was wondering if that one had it.
yeah.
Good. I'm glad it does.
Yeah, so the tree gets this like phantom canopy of like vaporous leaves, which is really funny also because we're in a desert and they're all dead trees because there's not enough water, you know. So again, it's like the rain is bringing, I don't know, it's like the rain is gonna give it leaves, you know, if it comes and rains here. And then a final like crazy you know, connection or something is, keep in mind especially this, the tree with the you know, cloud background. And then if we go way over the very stately sprint pace of the witness.
Yes, like a grandiose shuffle.
So way over here, in the like initial vault area, where we got the James Burke video, you might remember seeing this weird little branch through the window, and it too has a little vaporous cloud thing that comes and frames it, which also makes the big tree into even more of a super 2D 3D moment, because that big tree, you walk all around it and the placement of the faces everywhere just confirms the fact, you know, it confirms like the idea of like you have to walk all around the tree in order to see all the different faces, versus here it's literally framed by this little painting, or you know, by this you know, this little brickwork around here, so you only have this one forced perspective on it. So in a way this is almost like a tutorial of like the forced perspective tricks in the witness, just like how this is like a tutorial of like the secret stuff, and the, you know, in the theater videos and everything. So this is like the little mini tree, and then it grows up to be the big giant, like, you know, huge three-dimensional tree. So bringing another 2D 3D moment to things. And of course the frame, as we'll talk about later, is also constantly experienced in the witness by the frame mechanic that we get with the kind of environmental puzzle mechanic. Yeah, the freeze frame thing. Alright, so I've laid out all of this like different potential symbolism, but much less confidently than I have in, say, the video that I did, episode 12, about the marsh statues and the you know, the statues out of the mountain and stuff, and the Venus symbolism and all that.
I really hate that this is so prominent, because I really think it's just like a bunch of cool faces.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like, what is
think
it?
that there's anything really truly
so I
symbolic
don't think that there's like a grand theory of this. I think the main thing is like it's supposed to be a 2D 3D moment, just like is so common in the witness, and sort of a bigger and grander one than the typical illusion, and more
really
detailed.
beautiful.
But I think it's also kind of an artistic experiment. Like the way that the witness built all of these trees is they made like modular bits of branches, and then the artist could, you know, sculpt those and recombine them in a bunch of different ways to make all the custom trees, because they didn't want to just make one tree model and then plant it around, because people would realize that it was all the same. You know, that's just not the witness's style. No. So they had these kind of modular parts. So I'm sure they were like playing around with modular parts, and created this sort of like giant fancy cool thing just as a way of exploring. And of course stylistically this has a lot in common with the other tree branch illusions on the island, like the Eyes of God illusion that we get over here, or the shadow illusions over here, which are done with the actual tree branch geometry, casting little shadows onto the panels. But I don't think there's a huge connection with the Quarry or the Zen area. Like I don't think this is like Zen themed or anything, you know, more so than all this other stuff, nor does there seem to be a huge connection with the desert area, except, you know, it's about like geometry and light, just insofar as all things in the witness are kind of about geometry.
The only possible connection you can think of is that across the way you've got autumn, and then you've got like summer or something.
Yeah, maybe it's like another season, but we already have the bear trees in there.
I
but
know.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different
like
little
snow,
biome or
kind
something.
of.
Yeah, maybe it's like winter and summer in the desert.
I don't know.
But
It's a stretch.
yeah. So all of these things are like sort of a stretch, or like another thing that I'm thinking is like, oh, maybe the faces are like the blind man and the elephant. Right, because
that's cool.
they're all
That
these
seems
different people, and they're bringing their different perspectives to, you know, to the problem of trying to understand life and the universe and stuff. And so, you know,
And
this
they only
is
exist in like one.
yes,
dimension.
and they're all kind of
that's
contributing to this greater whole without even quite being aware of it. So maybe that's kind of meant to be the symbolism. It's sort of a civilizational thing, like we're all bringing our individual knowledge to this collaborative effort. But like, how do I know if that's really in the game or if I'm just making this up? There's this thing that people call pareidolia, which is seeing faces in stuff, which is, I feel like, is that being referenced here? I don't know, because there's a lot of faces in this tree, and if you go online, a lot of people will tell you that this weird little thing is like an old man or something, right? That this is like the beard, and I don't know, there's like eyes and a little frown in there or something like that. I don't totally see it, but like maybe from some viewpoints it kind of makes some sense. But it's like, no, there's not an old man in there. You're just crazy and seeing things, because it's that all that stuff is already there for a reason. It's constrained by this statue over here. Like, it has to be here. The reason why there's a bunch of weird geometry there is to make like the lips of this person, and so it's like explained away. Like, you have this weird thing, you have two potential explanations for it. Maybe it's an old man in sculpture, or maybe it's like a woman's lips in silhouette. And then when you discover the one explanation, then that sort of, you no longer have a mystery. You don't need to posit that there's like a weird old man anymore. So there's sort of like that's interesting in this case, but also kind of is the philosophy that I take towards like trying not to overinterpret things too badly on this island. Although, like I said, I have kind of a maximalist approach to just like laying out all my takes.
Just go for it.
But there's a lot of places, and it's trouble because the Witness is so good at finding things that that match in multiple ways. But you do kind of figure like sometimes things are like over constrained. Like, I'd be like, oh, it'd be like so perfect for these to be like the seasons, and then it's like, well, but you'd have to have bare trees in order to make the shadow puzzles work, because they couldn't work any other way. So like, maybe it's the seasons, but we can't really say. Versus if there wasn't the shadow puzzle mechanic, then
there's no other
it'd be like,
reason. So
it's bare trees,
odd,
so it must symbolize something, like it must be there for a reason.
Or like,
So, I mean, this, as a 2D, 3D type thing, this also brings to mind the cover of Gödelischer Bach, which has this amazing sculpture of like these two cubes hanging in the air, and they each have been sort of drilled through in each direction to produce a G, an E, or a B in shadow effect. And the cubes are actually different because of chirality and stuff, but that is kind of an example of something that's like fully constrained, right? Like, you couldn't drill another letter through there. I mean, you could if you made the cube like way bigger and you just drilling tiny letters, but you then the letters would have to be like, they would have to be hollow rather than the solid object casting the shadow. Anyways, we'll put a picture on screen so you guys can understand. But that's like an example. It's like, you can constrain a 3D object in those 3 dimensions because we live in a 3-dimensional world. And so you can put like 3 pictures into a solid object by drilling it through in those orthogonal directions. But you can't put a 4th picture in there. And so I try and keep that in mind when I'm like analyzing stuff, because, it's always like, if they have some free direction, like, this whole castle area, like, it could be rotated to face whatever way. Like, why, is it facing Mecca or something? Like, why did they put it here, And maybe I'd be like, oh my god, like, it's facing that tower over there because, like, it has some kind of amazing connection. Yeah, because this is the old and that's the new. But then once I realized that, like, oh no, actually it's like in line with the sun, like so many buildings in the Witness, then it's probably not like a reference to like, the Quarry chimney stack or something, because even though it'd be cool to have like escalating heights of the thing, because the mystery is explained away by facing the sun. And we'll leave aside the fact that they could have like rotated it left or right and made it match both of them or something like that.
That doesn't mean that it couldn't also be doing something else, but like, it's less clean. It's probably one main reason.
Yeah, but then similarly, there's all these little hints that you can use sometimes to confirm that something was an intended meaning. Like when too many things kind of line up, or the Witness often uses like audio log placements to do this. So like having, I mean, in almost all of the audio log placements have like some cute aspect to like they're placed in that specific spot for a reason,
Make you think
which
about this,
both reinforces the theme of the audio log and also confirms for you that the art around it, like because of the jokey tie-in to the audio log, like they were thinking about the art in relation to the themes, and you know, so those kind of like reciprocal tie-ins can help like constrain the, I don't know, like kind of lock down some of the things that they're working with.
Yeah, so what you're talking about earlier was interesting about there being options and then choosing to constrain them in one way or another. So you can tell if something is intentional, if it could have been any other way, or if it probably wasn't intentional because it had to be that way. Because you couldn't, for example, have all the trees around here be like covered in super vibrant vines or something, because like that doesn't make any sense. It's in a desert. So if you did see a tree covered in vines over here, you'd be like, okay, there must be some symbolism going on.
And I think this is an interesting theme in Context of the Witness. I mean, it does show up in the game because, as I was joking earlier, Pareidolia is seeing faces and things, and they've literally put faces all over this tree. But also, the Secret Psalm 46 lecture is almost entirely about that, which is kind of surprising. Like, in this whole series of videos that I've made about all of the different, the different themes of the different zones, we haven't really talked that much about the subject of the Secret of Psalm 46 stuff, and we will talk about it eventually when we get to it, if we ever get to it, because it'll be the very final video that we ever make in this series. But the Secret of Psalm 46 video, the like basic surface level takeaway is, well, I mean, there's a lot, but one of them is to not get hung up hunting for weird little Easter eggs and things, because that's not the main meaning of the thing, right? Like the main meaning of the thing is like the overall, the core themes, and not like, did they, put in like a cute little braid reference in the castle over there, or like, is there some way of activating the levers or something? But like it's apparent from the whole text of the work, and so like don't focus too much on tiny Easter eggs as like something that'll like secretly unlock everything. And that isn't too, that's relevant to like players who are being super completionist and like trying to get some kind of like super endgame mega secret ARG type stuff. But it's not super relevant to what we're doing in this video series. But then the Secret of Psalm 46 also talks about people kind of going crazy, like analyzing Shakespeare and finding like secret Bible codes and stuff. And it seems to kind of be warning you away from that. Like, don't just, when something feels so meaningful and it feels like it's about like God, or it's like the greatest work of literature, or it's like the best video game in all of 2016, or something like that, then you can feel tempted to imbue it with this like mystical quality, and then it's like you start seeing everything in it, which people famously do to religious texts, but the example of Shakespeare is really interesting because it's more unusual. And I've kind of used this video series as like a venue to just kind of go and explore the island and like experience the vibes and talk about all of these ideas that I like thinking about. But how do we know when we're getting too wrapped up in stuff? That's sort of like a core concern of the game, and the game is very like it wants you to experience all this meaning, but it's
a search for meaning. It's teaching you how to search for meaning.
Yeah,
but then
exactly.
You can also have things that feel meaningful that just
yeah. Like the game is happy to create a really meaningful experience, but it doesn't want to just have you like experience like profound feels TM that aren't supported by the text, because the whole game is about like searching for truth and stuff, and sort of like being rational. And similarly, it's also about like game design and nonverbal communication. So it doesn't want to just be like saying a bunch of vague stuff. But when you're committed to this like nonverbal style, then it can be difficult to get the game's meaning. And some people will like have these like death of the author takes where they'll be like, which nobody really has like in real life, kind of like when it's like time to talk about academic literature, they're like, death of the author, like the author's intention is totally unimportant to the text. And like in a certain academic sense that's true, but also like people then just go around trying to figure out what the meaning of a text was. I don't know. I feel like most people take that approach rather than like, oh, this text just fell out of the sky. And anyways, other people have like spent a lot more time, too much time, in fact, developing sophisticated death of the author takes. But The Witness is like big on like, I, the designer of the game, am trying to communicate things to you, the player. And like this experience of communication is this thing that we're gonna, we're both gonna work at it, and we're gonna try and understand each other and stuff. So it doesn't just want to be a free-for-all. So I think like maybe that's part of the theme of this tree, or maybe it's just a 2D 3D moment, and that messaging that I've been talking about is just exclusive to the underground stuff and the Secret of Psalm 46 video. Who can really say? But I had the wonderful experience after I made the Taiji video of actually getting some feedback from the developers of the game, and them being like, yeah, like that awesome take that you had about like how the one zone was like a water recycling plant. Like that's just not true, because we intended that to be like a iron foundry, and like there was no recycling of water going on in that area.
Oh,
so,
no!
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that was so fun, though.
But then they were like, yeah, there's stuff like I'm really
Okay.
happy that you picked up on and stuff.
Yeah. That's
So-
really, that's kind of nice to actually get some actual knowledge of how much you
Yeah,
are overinterpreting.
yeah. And I was like,
underinterpreting.
hey, I kind of figured. And,
No, you didn't.
well, I kind of figured with Taiji especially, but it's less like super thematically triple layered than everything in The Witness. But anyway, so that's all the musing about like meaning and art, and why I read so much crazy BS into all these levels. And
Fair enough.
I kind of leave it up to you, because I figure that like The Witness is interested in communicating its ideas from The Witness to you, but I am also interested in communicating my ideas to you. So I feel, if I just like occasionally fly off the handle and like unleash some weird loose cannon take about religion or whatever that like isn't actually in the game, then it's just on you guys to figure out if that's actually BS. Yeah, but the one thing that we do know that this is actually about is the 2D 3D stuff, and like pulling you into that, like the kind of like meditative first person worlds of the environmental puzzles and of like direct perception, and away from this sort of 3D scientific objective world, which is the world being like simulated by the graphics card and everything, and is the world that creates this sort of like weirdly like unimaginable. I mean, like I'm literally looking at it, it's just a tree, so why am I freaking out? But go outside and look at a tree someday. They're just they're pretty cool. And this kind of like crazy fractal shape that it's not just like a cube or something where it's like, oh, it's four squares.
It's impossible to remember every bit of this tree. Even as you're staring at it, you kind of can't hold it all in your mind at once.
It's like fully embedded into, I don't know, so it's just a really strong image of like projection, and the kind of like the difference that you get between the full object and like the representation of the object, and then like our perception of the object, which is like then skewed again perhaps. So like The Witness has all these illusions. It loves doing this. Why does it love doing this? One answer would be, well, it's trying to clue people into the nature of the environmental puzzles, because people are going to see this and be like, oh, look, it's like it makes a cool special shape. And then later, when they see one of the environmental puzzles, like, oh, there's a really cool one that you can see from the roof over here, then they will be pre-clued in from the experience of seeing all of the dang illusions and little details and clever things and stuff. Oh, look at how the corner of that bricks.
Wait, that's why it's cut off a little bit.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, that's funny. Witness at it again. But I think it's more the other way around, right? It's not like this is supposed to like clue you into the fact that there's this random game mechanic. It's that both the game mechanic and the illusions, it's like the environmental puzzles are there to constantly make you have this 2D 3D experience of like seeing this amazing 3D shape and then being like, oh, like what's up with that? Like now I have this perspective shift where I'm looking at it as this flat series of pixels, as just this two-dimensional visual image. And that perspective shift is like it's analogous. The Witness uses that as an analogy for this thing that I'm always talking about in these episodes, which is the the first person experience of consciousness versus the like third person scientific description of the world, and also in a more literal sense. So it's both kind of like a highfalutin metaphor for like, oh, there's these two ways of seeing things, but it's also more of a literal sense of like, this is kind of what the experience of mindfulness feels like. It's more of a wide field awareness. You're more experiencing the raw perception, which is like the 2D visual field, rather than all the implications and abstractions built on that raw perception, which is like the 3D world of the tree or whatever. So to that end, I've talked in earlier videos about the environmental puzzles. Like I had a episode in the jungle where I talked all about my view of like the purpose of the environmental puzzles as a mechanic. And I think that was episode 6. And then maybe again in the Rupert Spira video on the awesome shipwreck, which itself has a bunch of really like kind of mind-bending, like pushing the envelope environmental puzzles. But I always find myself wanting to come back to the same Rupert Spira video, which is not the one that's actually in The Witness, but is like an FAQ that he had with some people where he tries to explain the kind of shift to non-dual perception in the exact language of the metaphor that The Witness uses, which is like looking at an immersive 3D scene of a world and then suddenly realizing that you're just looking at a 2D screen. So this will be the end of my portion of the episode, but I'm just going to fade out directly to that video so you guys can get the in-depth Rupert Spira take on the Witness screen freezing mechanic, which is really like, it's like, you know, this experience of mindful non-dual awareness is not like this deep thing. You don't have to like look deeper and deeper into this, you know, into all the things that are going on in your experience in your life. It's like this kind of shallow thing where you kind of realize the flatness or like the window that you're looking out of, and the thing that's the same regardless of all the changing content on the screen. So with that, thank you for watching this mini episode, and enjoy this Rupert Spira clip.
Let's say you're watching TV and you're watching a movie, and you're looking at our favorite view, the landscape, and someone comes in and says to you, look at the screen. What do you do?
Well, if there's something on the screen, I can't really see the screen unless there's no image there, or I can see through it, or...
No. When you're looking at a TV, the TV's off, yes? You just look at the blank TV, you're seeing the screen, yeah? You turn the movie on, the screen doesn't disappear. You're still looking at the screen, but the screen now appears as a landscape. You get involved in the movie. It's a wonderful film. You get totally involved in it. You forget that you're seeing a screen, and you think that you're seeing a landscape. So your friend comes in and your friend says to you, what are you looking at? And what are you seeing? And you say, I'm seeing this marvelous landscape. And your friend says to you, look at the screen. Are you not already seeing the screen? Are you not already looking at it?
In the form of the landscape.
Yes, but it's the same screen. It's exactly the same screen that was there before you turned the movie on. It appears now, it's taken the shape of a landscape, but it's still the same screen. The screen hasn't disappeared. Yeah? So would you say that it was to see the screen was a new event? Is it a marvelous experience in the movie?
Not in that metaphor, no.
No. Does the screen even show up in the movie?
No.
No. What you're looking for is an event in the movie. You're still subtly imagining that enlightenment is a wonderful or even a not so wonderful event in the movie. And as long as you're looking for it in the movie, you're going to seem not to be seeing the screen because your attention is focused on objects. So what do you have to do to, when you're looking at the landscape, what do you have to do to see the screen?
In that metaphor, nothing.
Yes, the screen is not something new that comes in. Enlightenment is not something that is new. It's not something that was lost and now has to be found. At best, and even this is not quite true, but at best we could say it was overlooked due to our fascination with the drama in the movie, that is the drama of the body, mind and world, due to our fascination, our exclusive fascination with these appearances, we seem to have lost sight of their reality, the screen. And as a result of that, we think, oh, I must go looking for it. And off we go around the world, visiting teachers and ashrams and everything. We go on this terrific journey around the world, which is like the character in the movie searching for the screen. So now you are searching, the equivalent in your life is you are looking, traveling, you're the character in the movie, traveling around the world looking for the screen. In other words, you are looking in the mind and the body in your case, not in the world, but in the mind and the body for some special experience, which is, that's it, that's the shift, that's the event. Now I'm on the other side of the fence. There isn't a fence that you finally cross to get to enlightenment. Enlightenment is just it's like the moment you recognize the screen in the movie, and the moment you recognize it, simultaneous with that recognition, you recognize, oh, I was always seeing the screen. I never really ceased seeing the screen, but only because of my fascination with the drama in the movie that it seemed to be absence, the screen, and as a result of that apparent absence, I went off out into the world searching for it.
I was always the screen, right? I mean, that's the next step.
Yes, you have never, for a fraction of a second, ceased being the presence of awareness, the unlimited, ever-present awareness. You have never ceased to be that.
I feel that more and more, but this illusory separate self, sometimes she's kind of melting away and becoming more vague, you know? And I go, oh, wow, great, she's starting to disappear.
Why do you want her to disappear? What
because
you're saying,
she's miserable sometimes.
Okay, what you're saying, so the equivalent in our metaphor of what you're saying is, you're watching this period drama, there are lots of characters, and there's one woman in the movie.
I don't want her in that movie.
You don't like her. And what you're saying is, until that woman gets out of the movie, I can't see the screen. Only when she leaves the movie, only then will I notice the screen. That's what you're saying.
Well, as you said earlier, all the energy that is spent on her, to no avail.
But whose
No
problem is she? For the screen, is this troublesome woman in the movie a problem? She might be a problem for one of the other characters.
Right. Part of her own self.
But she's not a problem for the screen. In fact, awareness doesn't have problems, doesn't know problems. Why? Because in order for there to be a problem, there needs to be resistance. There needs to be the I don't like this. That's what makes a situation a problem. Yeah? But awareness is like empty space. It's never saying to the current experience, I don't like you. And therefore it doesn't have problems. So it's not saying, my horrible separate self needs to be got rid of. I'm fed up with her. The I that is fed up with her is another form of herself. In other words, the separate self is perpetuating itself by trying to get rid of itself.
Right, I know, yeah.
And so you're caught in this mind from which you are understandably tired of trying to get rid of yourself. I, the separate self, want to get rid of myself so that I, the separate self, can experience enlightenment. And you're going round and round and round, and you're rightly frustrated and disheartened because you're engaged in a never-ending endeavor, which is perpetuating the separate self by trying to get rid of it. It's just see the situation clearly. You cannot get rid of an illusion.